So I wanted to start with just a brief introduction. I'm Christy Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Judicial Commission on Mental Health. And I'll let Daniela introduce herself.
Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Daniela Chisholm. Now with the Texas Judicial Commission on Mental Health. I was just at the El Paso County Attorney's Office, and I'll share a little bit more about the roles that I held there. But glad to be in Hays County and hope to give you all some good information and answer any questions that we can.
Thank you. Okay, so the last discussion was great. I've heard a lot about JBCR, right? And you always learned something that was so detailed and needed that. I wanted to back up just a minute just to make sure if anyone from the community was coming in, and competency restoration is a pretty deep legal concept. Would anybody want to hear just like a minute on the big picture of why we're doing competency restoration? Or are all of you in the weeds and you know where we're going? Any hands for like intro? Yeah, okay. All right, well, let's do that. Okay, so first of all, I'll show you, this is the two high courts in Texas sitting in 2018 to hear about why we needed a judicial commission on mental health. And the highest courts agreed. They heard from psychologists and psychiatrists, law enforcement, people with your jobs, community people with lived experience about how the people with mental health needs were in these courts and that our judges needed to be trained. They needed to have specialized technology, and that these cases were different, that they couldn't just be treated like any other case that is in front of a judge. So our commission is created. We have a small staff. You heard I just stole Daniela to be our AOT expert on staff, but we are in Austin, and our full-time job is to keep these new efforts that you're creating going. So you have a new case in front of you every day. We do not. We are focused on these system-wide improvements for the whole state, and we have a whole commission that is full of experts to tell us what's going on in their courtrooms, and we're very excited to have Judge Brown on the commission. And we want to be here for you. We create bench books, we create videos, so lean on us. Just if you remember nothing else, that you can call us and ask us stuff after. Okay, so what you might already know is that we have a crisis, not just in Texas, across the country. This is a prominent judge in Florida who said, I see more people in my court with mental illness than a doctor does sometimes, and that's what's wrong with that. He is an amazing judge who has turned his jails into mental health facilities. Because of these types of diversion programs that they're doing, they have been able to have fewer people going into jail, more people going into treatment that are appropriate for it, and able to redirect that funding and improve people's lives. So if you get the chance, that is a field trip you can take to Florida and observe that court in Miami-Dade. Other things you probably already know, but that people with mental illness are suffering at every turn. This was a study done inside a prison looking at risk factors and trauma that people with mental illness experience. So if you look at people with mental health issues as the dark blue and people without mental health issues as the more turquoise blue, you can see that people with mental illness experience more homelessness. They come from backgrounds where they were physically abused, sexually abused, in foster care. They had parents with substance abuse issues at a higher rate and parents who are incarcerated at a higher rate. It's interesting because Daniela has moved from the mental health unit where she worked in AOT and had a brief stint helping her office reorganize their juvenile justice department, and noticed that it's not a coincidence really that the same people she was seeing in the mental health unit when she moved over to the juvenile justice unit, that these are a lot of the same families, right? That they're doing parent calls for the youth into the state hospital, into the jails. And so things that we need to think about, big picture. All right, how many of you have seen the sequential intercept model? Some? Okay. It is a mouthful, but really it is just a tool. If you think about how this is a very complex societal problem, we want to be able to lay it out and look step by step at where we are in the problem and where we are in the solution. So we borrowed this from some Florida PhDs. We made it a Texas version so that it matches our system a little better. But if you do a sequential intercept mapping, then you walk through and see what gaps you have in your resources. You find out, where your profession lies in this model. And it's just a really organized way to talk about solutions and to bring everyone together. So our bench book is written around the sequential intercept model. And today we are talking about either before someone crosses over into 1, so we're in 0, or possibly someone has already been all the way through the system, right? That's not rare for us to see them then coming back through at the beginning again. And we are trying to intercept them as early as possible. That's where the name came from. It's an intercept model. Where can we intervene to keep someone from going back through that recycle process? Okay, I'm gonna take a moment to talk about the big picture here. Daniela is, like I said, our expert on AOT and is going to give you all some program information about what she experienced. But I want you all to know that if you have not heard this, that Hays County is being applauded, you're being observed, everyone is so excited that you have the judge that is leading a mental health court and also an AOT court, because this is a dream. The big urban counties have different judges for those types of courts, right? So you have probate judges in all of the urban cities, and you have criminal court judges. So we talked about this in theory, where you have judges that have both types of jurisdiction, where she has general jurisdiction and can hear both cases. What would happen then if you could be the judge that is looking at a person and decide, is this a person that needs to go down this path in a mental health court? Is this a person that would do better in an assisted outpatient treatment court? So this is an exciting scenario, and you have a lot of fans and you have a lot of people supporting you and interested in what you're doing. So please take advantage of that. So today we want to talk about what AOT is, how it works, the essential elements for success, what the pathways are, and what the resources are. Generally, when you think about an assisted outpatient treatment court, it is a tool for civil courts and also for criminal courts when it's an offense that does not involve a serious bodily injury. And also for your mental health court systems, your mental health systems to all work together. And we're talking about the repeat faces that you see that have the serious mental illness and are caught in that cycle of repeat hospitalizations, homelessness, incarcerations. This is a specialized tool to help those that you can see the potential and you just can't quite get them there, that they are not engaging with their treatment voluntarily, and that if they were involved with a treatment plan and the support that comes from being in an AOT court, that we can save lives. So I think a really interesting point is that not only is the judge there to have that influence over the person that is the participant, but also to bring the team together and to make sure that those resources are showing up and to hold everyone accountable. Because we know that one of the ways we get here is by people not having those services in even a voluntary capacity. But the good news is that these types of courts have been tried out throughout the country and they work. These statistics come from the Treatment Advocacy Center. We just did, I know a couple of you were there, a training on AOT in San Antonio last week. So numbers like 83% fewer arrests, 83% fewer incarcerations, 74% fewer experienced homelessness, and 77% experienced fewer psychiatric hospitalizations. Well, I'm not saying that right. See, that fewer experienced psychiatric hospitalizations, that 77% of them experienced that. And the cost savings. This is what I implore you all to do. When you start a new program, start collecting the data from day one. As much as you can, even if you don't know what you're gonna do with all of it yet, there are some data tools that we can share that Treatment Advocacy Center has developed. But when you can go back and show your county commissioners at the end of this SAMHSA grant that this has saved your county X number of dollars, and it has been the humane and the right thing to do, and that you have people that can come back and say, I graduated from this court, and my life was on a really hard trajectory, and now I'm in school, and now I'm doing these positive things. That is going to be so convincing for your county. So start keeping that data. So the different paths to AOT. It is commonly used in Texas in the civil court system. That is really where it started. It is also available to those low-level offenses that we're talking about if there's a transfer process. We have a law about it. We're not going to get too deep into it today, but it is a great opportunity. So I think Daniela can tell you more about how it is used for people being discharged from inpatient treatment when they're not quite ready to be completely on their own in the community, but inpatient is no longer appropriate, right? We're trying to use that least restrictive setting, and if inpatient is no longer appropriate, we need to move them along. We don't need to be holding on to them just because they're not quite ready to do it all on their own. So AOT might be a great solution for people coming back into your community, integrating, and you're surrounding them with those resources and making sure they're going to be successful. They can come directly from the community. That would be ideal, right? If one of us has a family member that we know their mental health is really deteriorating, and we know the signs, and we know that the next stop is jail because we've seen it happen before, or God forbid, we see that may come in the future. You can, as a community member, reach out and try to get your loved one involved in this program, and it can come from so many different resources. And then that last step that we're talking about is a diversion over from the criminal justice system. And we talked just a minute about competency restoration. So we want all the options. When someone is incompetent to stand trial, their trial stops. Their whole legal process stops. And it's a good cause, right? This starts from a constitutional right. We all agreed for our Constitution that if you are not able to help your attorney with your case, if you're not able to understand the charges against you, that is unconstitutional to move forward with a criminal trial against you. So it starts from a great cause. 30 years ago, when we were developing the 46B that you heard about in the Code of Criminal Procedure, Professor Shannon is from Texas Tech. He was one of the people writing this law and tells us that the judges were not using this enough, that people were not getting competency evaluations ordered, and that it was too far the other way. And sometimes we overcorrect, right? So 30 years ago, the law was written very low barriers to get someone into the competency restoration process. So it didn't distinguish between if you have a criminal trespass and you really aren't going to benefit from this whole process of going to the state hospital. We just left it open and said, if you're incompetent, here is a pathway to go get your competency restored. Well, Professor Shannon will say, we could have never imagined that would be the path that everyone would be trying to go down. This is the slide that describes that everyone now in Texas has tried to get on the same highway, and we're creating traffic jams. And it's been good intentions. Judges, attorneys have thought, I see a very ill person in front of me. If I put them on this long wait list for competency restoration, they're going to go to this magical hospital, everything will be better, and they're going to get this treatment that they need. And what we have found out is that the treatment is not created for that. That wasn't the purpose. It was to stabilize people, to help them understand those legal requirements so they can get back in the trial process. So this has not been the comprehensive treatment that people dreamed of. It really should be reserved for the more serious cases where we know that they're going to go to trial. If you look at our wait list right now and know that it takes almost a year for someone to get into competency restoration at a state hospital, it isn't logical to put misdemeanors on that, they're either going to time out at 60 days or maybe get a year. They'll just start to get into it, and then they're going to time out at the hospital. And it's really not going to be as successful as you would hope. Now, there's no law against that. If it's a serious misdemeanor and they need to go through that process and see where we can get, then the judges have that discretion. But we are trying to teach alongside with HHSC about eliminate the wait, that if it is a low-level misdemeanor, what other things can we do? If it's someone who's not a threat to our community and that is not the concern, it's really just a technicality that we're putting them on this train to competency restoration, what else can we do? So if we go back to AOT, starting in the civil probate courts, the strategy to address non-adherence, and from what I can tell, AOT courts and mental health courts kind of grew up in two different petri dishes. They were different players that developed it. Probate judges are so separate in most places, and they were working with psychiatrists developing this great model called AOT. And mental health courts were over here developing their model. And so it has just been in the last few years that we've started to look at the whole system and say, how can these work together? How can they shake hands? So it's exciting to know that we have had a law on the books in Texas for a while that you can transfer these low-level offenses over to this AOT court. Okay, so I think one other thing that I think is really exciting about AOT court is that it addresses the non-engagement. We know that people do not engage in the treatment that they should and sometimes even want to have. Lack of transportation could be a reason. Stigma is a big reason. You know, how many of us are willing to tell our boss, I'm out, I have a cold, my allergies are killing me? And we wouldn't make that same call to say, I'm having a really bad anxiety, depression day. So stigma is still everywhere we look and definitely discourages people from getting the treatment. There's inadequate community services right now. We are all working on that. We're all rowing in the same direction. HHSC is here, and they're building more beds at the hospital. They are hiring more people to help man those beds, and we're working on this problem from all angles. I've also heard people talk about the side effects of medication, that they're not minor, and that sometimes we're asking people to have unpleasant side effects to get to the results that we think they should have. There's a mistrust of doctors, and also you've probably heard the word anosognosia. We joke about how I didn't know that word until a couple years ago, and now I feel like I hear it all the time. But it is an actual symptom of many serious mental illnesses where you do not have insight that you have a mental illness. And we have heard experts talk about how even if you have been on medication for years and your symptoms have been under control and that you're doing really well, that they have had people say, well, why are you taking this medication? And loved ones have said, I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it for the judge. I'm doing it for the community. I still don't think I have a mental illness. I can't see the difference. I can't see that the medication makes a difference. So it's a powerful symptom that comes along with this, and I feel like AOT is a great solution to bring awareness to that, even if they don't feel it themselves. They know that it's a part of the solution for their life path. So I am going to turn it over to Daniela to talk more about her experience in AOT, and you really should take this opportunity to ask any questions because she has been in the trenches doing this. And I've already told Judge Brown that all of you are welcome to call on us at any time that we can help.
A little shorter than Christy, okay. So just a little bit about my background, my involvement with AOT and how I got here. And really it's kind of sharing with Christy, it's full circle because I was not really interested or wanted to help AOT as a defense attorney when it was first brought to my attention. I was voluntold as ad litem that I was going to be the attorney for an AOT program in El Paso. So I'd been a long time defense attorney, practicing criminal and then getting into the mental health civil cases, doing the mental health inpatient hearings. And coming up on 5 years ago, we had an AOT program started through a SAMHSA grant in El Paso. And again, probate judge voluntold me, you're going to be part of this program. And to be very honest, I was really concerned just because didn't have a clue about AOT. I'd never heard about it. I just knew it seemed like my clients were going to be on these longer court orders and more requirements of them. And so I was really skeptical. And so it's come full circle that after being part of the AOT program for a few years, serving as the ad litem for my clients, I then went to the county attorney's office and became part of the mental health unit, now serving on the other side with the applications for the outpatient commitments and getting to work the AOT program from that side. So I really got to have the dual side of seeing how this program works. And more than anything else, the program definitely works with my clients and then becoming participants, but it also really worked on me as an attorney. And I think that's really important to share with you all, is that this is something that is impactful for every person that's involved in this program, whether you're the judge or you're the case manager, you're one of the attorneys serving either for the clients or the participants, or as the prosecutor in this program. It really begins to unfold different layers within yourself, allow different parts of you to come forward and participate in this program as well alongside this individual, our community member who we're trying to help, so that they are empowered to be able to take care of themselves and their mental health and have these services and eventually get off of this court order. So a little bit about AOT is not something that we're looking at where we can fine individuals or we can put them in jail if they don't comply or adhere to a court order. We cannot forcibly administer medications, but what we can do is create an environment, a supportive interdisciplinary team that develops relationship with our community member that may not have ever had this opportunity, and help figure out what those goals are for this individual. Some may be just to stay out of the hospital or to not have any more contact with the jail or have any criminal charges. May be to become eventually, as some of the participants in a program in El Paso did, to go on to become peer support specialists and give back to the community and their new roles. So there really is a wide spectrum of what this program is. A little bit about how to get in the program. I know Christy touched on the various routes that we can come in, whether we're stepping down from an inpatient setting into an outpatient program like AOT, or we're stepping up from the community where we do need a little bit more help and services and that engagement with the judge, or we're stepping over from the criminal system. So different pathways. In El Paso, we heavily focused on stepping down from the psychiatric hospitals, was how we got most of our referrals, and share a little bit about what we considered when we were bringing somebody into our program. The great thing about AOT, and since you all are developing it here together, is this is an opportunity for each of the stakeholders to really share your input and develop the criteria as well for your participants. And it can really be valuable to see what it is that your community needs. Obviously, we have the legal criteria that needs to be met in order to have that court order in place for outpatient services. But as far as starting a new program, it's really beneficial if you can see it's going to be trial and error. We had a lot of bumps and ups and downs as we were beginning our program in El Paso. But over time, we began to develop a rhythm and seeing what was the type of participant that we had resources available for that would be successful. And then as we were stabilized, begin to bring in other participants that maybe we're going to need more support and more services, and we were ready for them. So we kind of built up. We made some mistakes in the beginning, trying to go a little bit too fast and had our expectations a little too high, and had to come back, but that's okay. That was a learning experience, and I'd love to share with you all some really important things that I don't like to say there's a bad candidate for AOT. I think it's really important, again, case by case, to look at considerations that may be a little bit more resource-based, depending on what your county has available to you for resources in the program. But if we have somebody that can engage in services voluntarily, then this wouldn't be a community member that would be necessarily appropriate for AOT, because they are already able to do that, and that's the goal of AOT, is to get somebody to that point where they're able to get off the court order and do that voluntarily. Something that is also really important is that, of course, we have a lot of co-occurring diagnoses, and including a substance use disorder. But if we have that as the sole diagnosis, we need that mental illness diagnosis as well. So that would maybe be a factor to consider. And we're always looking at least restrictive options. And that goes back really to the voluntary point again, that if they're able to engage and show up to their services, even if they're not making every case manager appointment or every day of medication, that is a little bit of a different category than what we'd be looking for when looking at an AOT participant. If there's a significant intellectual deficit, we do co-occurring again, but if that's a primary diagnosis, then that may need services that are tailored more specific to that individual. And if somebody likes to be hospitalized, some community members, that is a safe place for them. And when they do go into crisis, they do want to be at the hospital. And so we're trying to work with community members that want to be back in the community, and that's the goal, to help them in the community setting. Also, if we can't find them, or they don't maybe have housing, it can be a little bit more challenging. Not that it's impossible to do, but we just need to know what resources we may need to have in order to help them. And you all have the pass outs for the AOT treatment plan here, and it's the same criteria. We're looking at somebody 18 or older, they have a serious mental illness, and this goes back to AOT is always going to be about voluntary compliance. Are they able to do that on their own, or do they need the court order to be able to help them? There's various factors that come into play when we're looking at an AOT program, and the thing about AOT is it's a dual accountability system. So not only are we asking this participant in our program, here are the things on our treatment plan that you have signed off and agreed to do, it's part of our court order, but we're also asking, and it's not just the local mental health authority or the local behavioral health authority to provide services and help this individual, but we're asking each of our stakeholders to show up for this person, to do your role fully, so that this individual really does have that opportunity to be successful. And that's really important. This is something that is not always, we have a focus on, hey, you need to take your medications, you need to go to your appointments, you need to do all of these things on your end. And I think it's really important. Obviously, everybody here in this room is engaged in the work and cares about the work, but it's an opportunity for us to step into those roles more fully so that we do give the full effect of this program to whichever community member we may be serving at the time. Here's just a factors to consider as far as who identifies the candidates, what criteria is met, making sure that the due process rights are safeguarded at all stages of the proceedings. Again, there's I serve as the attorney ad litem as a private attorney, but the public defender's office usually has an attorney in most counties that I have visited that represents the participant, to make sure that their voice is being heard in court, that they understand the court proceedings in front of them, and also to just be that advocate for them in a court process. Even though most AOT programs are relatively laid back as the way that the judge engages with the participants, it can still be a very scary process to know that you're going to have to go in front of a judge or be there with prosecutors. So it's really important that we take care of that element for our participants as well. And like any program, we have really good lines of communication between our stakeholders and partners involved with our AOT programs so that issues can be addressed early on. And when we're talking about somebody who may have some challenges or barriers in being able to successfully complete voluntary services, this needs to be a close eye on all the team members of those early stages of deterioration so that we don't have to go back to an inpatient setting, and be able to unpack in a community setting what is happening with this individual, who's going to take responsibility for what that need may be, so that we can continue to serve our participant in the community. And that's going to go to the early detection and intervention. And the goal of this is not to have somebody on a court order forever. This is, the idea is each case is different. Some people may be on for 90 days or for 6 months or longer than that. Realistically, it's seen about the 9-month period is usually kind of the minimum that people start to see the benefits, because it takes time to trust people, right? And if you have just walking into the setting where you're trying to develop relationships with judges and psychiatrists and lawyers, it can be overwhelming. And so people need time to develop trust and to build relationships with these stakeholders as well. And so as that time progresses, the goal is get off of this court order, be able to live in the community, have these new resources, have these goals achieved, and have goals for the future that they want to achieve as well. And really, it's important to have a smooth transition out of this program into whatever level of care that they may be headed to. Maybe it's going to stay the same and then just remove the court order, or maybe that at that point they're ready for a lower level of care, and that's also another option for our participants. But really making sure that that's going to be a nice, smooth transition. So I use the language is used is not really like not compliant. It's non-adherent to what it is that the court is asking, what is in that treatment plan, and it should be treated with an assertive approach, but not an authoritative approach where we're trying to cause any harm or trauma to an individual that has already experienced so many things throughout their life, whether it's through the criminal system or through the inpatient setting. How do we minimize any additional harm to this individual that we may be serving for this period of time? So really it's going to be heavily focused on obviously the case managers that really do the heart of the work of these programs, and having those communications with the client and then communicating it to the court so that the judge can utilize that experience and that relationship they've built to try to figure out how to solve these problems early on. So we lean really heavily on the case managers. I don't know that we would know what to do if we didn't have them, so very grateful for the case management that we have. And this goes to kind of shifting when we're talking about the black robe effect. The robe itself inherently evokes a certain kind of a response from any member of our community. You walk into a courtroom, even as a seasoned attorney, you walk in and you still have those nerves, and you stand up a little bit straighter. And imagine if your interaction with the judicial system has been somebody who may be threatening to put you back in jail, or you're going to extend your probation. And so we're trying to take a little bit different perspective with this program and utilizing it as a positive, evoking positive effect when they see a judge in their robe. And each judge does their program a little bit different. Some wear the robe, some don't wear the robe, but inherently knowing that a person at this table, part of your team, is in fact a judge. And this judge does care what's happening in your life and wants to help you. And at the same time, the agreement was that for you to go ahead and participate, or to go ahead and follow through with what your treatment plan is. So it's a tool I've seen work. It's wonderful. I have our probate judge in El Paso, Judge Strelitz. He does wear his robe, but we do things very informal in a conference room. He sits at the table with all of us, with our participant, and it's great to see how those interactions and relationships develop. And if necessary, sometimes he would ask for the participants to come to the courthouse into a more formal setting if there was some issues coming up, or it just didn't seem like the participant was understanding that this was a court order and they did need to comply with their services. But other than that, it was a very casual setting. And here's just a little bit about our process here in El Paso, which I was a part of for about, I think it's coming up on its 5th year. Not only did this give an opportunity to be part of this program, but to also support and celebrate each other as stakeholders, which we don't always do. So I know we often in here, we love the work, we do the work, but sometimes we need to look to the left and the right and celebrate one another and say, you're doing a great job. And so one of the ways that we did that in El Paso was just very simple. We always celebrated birthdays. We made a big deal about it. We had cake, and it was just for our team. It hadn't anything to do with the participants, but it was a way for us to continue to feel replenished, that we have support amongst ourselves and we are doing good work, because I can tell you that afternoon with AOT, it'll take you up and down. You have participants that are coming in and it is the most fantastic stories, and they're telling you that they've been sober and they just got a job and medication's going great, and they talk to their son who they haven't had and haven't talked to in however many years. And the next participant will come in and may not be having a very good day. and may not be feeling well, and maybe communicating, and we're discussing, is this something that looks like is rising to a level of emergency detention order? And it takes you like life, up and down through a 4-hour setting every week. And so it was really important for us to help one another to feel replenished and empowered by this work, as we're trying to do for our participants as well. But this is our attorneys, our judge, our case managers, our program director, and we have a good time together. We really try to keep it lighthearted as we can, because it's very serious work, and we really want our community members to be successful in their own treatment. We really did our referrals coming through the inpatient setting. They would be inpatient, finalizing their stabilization, doing well on their medications, and be ready for discharge. But these are our community members that once they come out of the hospital, there are some challenges, like Christy was going over, for various reasons as to why they may not be able to successfully do voluntary services. So we began to identify who are those familiar faces in the community that we could try to bring them in this program and try a different pathway for them. So once we're identified, they're screened by our local mental health authority that has the AOT program, our program manager that does the screening. We would get the certificates of medical examination done at the inpatient setting, and then we would have a commitment hearing to go ahead and have the order in place. And within the first, I think it was a day or so, they would meet with the case manager, and then they would come into the program to formally meet the judge within that first week. We found it was very, very helpful. The sooner that a participant met the judge and was able to start to build that relationship, the sooner that we saw progress and be able to build trusting relationships with our participants. We have every week, at least in El Paso, the way it was done, and every county can do it a little differently based on availability of your partners, but we had what's called roundtable once a week. It was every Thursday from 2:30 to 5 p.m. And we would have a variety of hearings. Some of them were status hearings, just doing check-ins to see how the person was doing in the program. Some of them we were having a new commitment for them to stay in the program. And then we also had graduations. So it was a really nice mix on Thursday, what we would be able to experience together. And with graduation, I'll kind of share with you a little bit more. I'm not sure if I have pictures, but it was a really great experience. And again, once the person comes out of the hospital, they have their case manager, and they're immediately connected with their attorney ad litem that's going to be representing them through the program, which is really important. So that contact information is provided, and our ad litem makes the effort to get a hold of the individual, say, hey, I'm representing you. We're going to see the judge, explain what that means to go see the judge, explain what the program is going to be like as far as the advocacy that ad litem is going to provide for them, and then go ahead and set them up for their first roundtable. Again, El Paso, it's very informal. I know I've seen programs all across the country that do it differently. Some judges are on the bench, in their courtroom, in the robe. And for us, Judge Strelitz decided to make it a very relaxed environment. We chose the local mental health authority, one of the clinics there that our participants would be receiving their services at for medication, with the nurse practitioner, with their case manager. And we decided to have a conference room there so it was accessible for the participants, and it would be a little bit easier as far as transportation. Again, like Christy was sharing, one of those issues that causes a barrier for people to be able to do services on a voluntary basis. On the first roundtable, we would take a lot of questions. We did some icebreakers. Back when we started the program, Judge Strelitz had grown out his hair during COVID, his very long curly hair. We'd ask who had better hair between me and the judge. I won a lot more when I was their attorney. As soon as I became the prosecutor, no one wanted to vote for me anymore, but it's okay. And then Judge Strelitz cut his hair, so no one had to vote any longer. But it was a really welcoming experience, and it was an opportunity everybody got to share and take off. When I was just starting as a prosecutor, this was a time for me to take off my armor and my courtroom kind of way of being and just be a person at the table. And that was really exciting and liberating for me as an attorney, that I did not have to always be that persona in my role. So I got to introduce myself, talk about a little bit what I like to do in my free time. I was a yoga teacher, so I could talk about that, and just be able to be a person at the table, but make it very clear, this is my role as well, but I am part of a team, and I'm going to make every effort in my role to support you in your process within my role, but just to make sure that they understood what it is that I did and who I am outside of my courtroom setting. And again, when we are talking about when somebody is going to be needing to stay in the program longer, there was some discussion about how do we go about doing this? Do we make this a very formal process, like a court hearing? And we decided, at least for us, that we were going to just, same setting, we just kind of changed our demeanor a little bit. If we were going to do a new commitment order, we in El Paso used 90-day orders. We didn't do the full year, we didn't do 45, we came right to the middle for that 90-day outpatient order. That seemed to be a good time frame for us to be able to see how the person was doing, and if they're needed to continue the program. We would be on the record, we had both attorneys present, and would go ahead and have the hearing, and after the hearing was done, go back to our more relaxed demeanor and continue a conversation between the judge and with the participant. So we have a couple options of how someone ends the program. It's quite possibly that they are nearing their third or fourth 90-day commitment order, and they are at a point where they're ready to graduate. They have been successfully adhering to their treatment plan, doing well on their medications. They have been achieving their goals, and they also feel ready, and the criteria is no longer met for them to be under a court order. And the court order expires naturally, and the person is transitioned out of the program. We have a graduation ceremony. It's really pretty informal. We invite the family members to come. We have cake. The judge dresses up. We all get dressed up for the graduation ceremony to make it special. There's a certificate that's signed by the caseworker, by the judge. The judge will go over a review of how the person did in the program, their successes, remind them of some moments that were challenging and how they were overcome, and then celebrate that person and their family if the family decided to show up. We do keep contact with the participant post graduation, just in case. I know as things are transitioning, if anything comes up, there always is an opportunity if we need to look at bringing them back into the program, and they do meet the elements to bring them back into the program. But it's been an excellent program for me to be a part of. I'm coming out of the trenches, and now as I've joined the JCMH to look at AOT programs a little bit differently, but I do have that experience of in the courtroom. It's not that our program is the only way to do it. There's a few things that we've learned by trial and error over the years, and as a program does develop any program, it's part of the process. But if there's anything that I can offer you of a real life scenario, I'm happy to help. A part of some resources that are available. There's so many resources now, and we have a whole page for AOT on the JCMH website that includes how to implement these programs. Some of the topic we talked about, that step over from getting someone from the criminal system to the AOT program. There's handbooks for that. There's AOT learning networks. And then we also have a Texas AOT coalition here in Texas. This picture used to be a little bit more impactful because I was working at a different agency and Christy was at her agency, but now we're together, so I'm probably just going to put her face up there from now on. But this is something that we decided to create. Well, it was asked if anybody from the state would step up and lead this initiative, and Christy was gracious enough to step forward, and I wanted to support. AOT has transformed me in so many ways that I was hopeful to give back, and so this coalition is here. We have meetings every couple of months. Part of what we do is we really work on legislative proposals. We create tools and resources for you all, especially programs that are just beginning. It's really important for you not to have to worry about some really simple things that have already been done in other counties and been worked out. Mentorship program for any programs that have been around for some time. Their judges are more than happy to extend a phone call, an email, to provide anything that they can. I know for sure that Judge Strelitz, I'm going to put him out there, that he'll be more than happy. He met Judge Brown at a previous conference, and also a form bank so that you all can have an idea of what are some things that have been done around the state. Some really great resources are the Texas AOT Practitioner's Guide and the implementation, the white paper that have been developed. That's through Treatment Advocacy Center, but we have those resources available on our JCMH website as well. These are the counties that we have. There's more counties, I believe, to be added to this with the new SAMHSA grant. We're growing, the word is spreading, and if I can say to you, gosh, this program does work. This was something that I had been doing the inpatient hearings for close to 10 years, and I was seeing I was representing the same clients over and over again. And this was the first program that actually helped my community members get out of the mental health system and into the community and live happier, healthy lives that were more fulfilling for them. And I have so many stories I could share, but I know I've been chatting for some time about this, but it is a program that I have found has been really successful. And I know like Christy was sharing, there's many pathways. You can start on one pathway. It doesn't have to be an overwhelming process for you all. It can be something you build up to. Get comfortable in one area and then begin to expand maybe into the criminal system, or do it all at one time. Have a very unique experience here in Hays County where you have the same judge looking at the cases and diverting, one side or the other. So I really am excited to see how this develops and really supporting Hays County for everything that you all are doing. August 15th is our next Texas AOT Coalition. It's a Zoom link. If you're interested in it, we can make sure to get you all invited to that coalition meeting. Our email addresses are here, phone numbers, and more than happy to answer any questions or anything that you all might need. Both Christy and I are here to help you all out. I don't know if you have anything else.
Any questions? It's a lot of information.
I might have missed it, but you said that people are court ordered into AOT, but there's no fines or jail time for participating. Are y'all just relying on the natural consequences of not participating, or is there anything that occurs to people who just refuse?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if somebody since it's a civil commitment, we have the mechanism of a pickup order or placing somebody possibly back into an inpatient setting if they meet that criteria.
Okay, makes sense.
Yes?
If you had a criminal case and you were going to pursue a civil commitment, so you got 2 CMEs for that, but then you found out they don't qualify for that, can you use those 2 CMEs for AOT as well, or do you need to get 2 new holders?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the CMEs are valid for a 30-day period, and so those CMEs could be used for a civil commitment.
But we did hear from, can you hear me, from one county that was saying to make sure, if you are doing that, to do the CMEs in the jail before the dismissal, to try to make sure that you are a good partner so that you don't have people relying on that and then it falls through. But it will be easier that you're one judge. You can see where it's 2 judges that the relationship can get sideways if one judge says, all right, I'm dismissing, handing it over to you, and the other judge says, oh, it actually doesn't meet criteria, and the criminal judge would be upset about that. So you guys have an opportunity to work all that out before you do the dismissal.
Absolutely, because that piece in the middle, again, it's not a guarantee. It's putting it on the docket to see if the order is granted, but it's not guaranteed, right? And I think that's really important for the criminal judges to understand, so there's not that, like Christy said, now we have an upset criminal judge say, hey, we were gonna do this because this was a guarantee. And that's something that comes up often, is that, again, we're still having to have that hearing on the civil side, make sure that order is granted.
And I would say too, to remember that in Texas it's transfer. There's some TAC documents that say dismissal. So some states you have to dismiss to move it over to AOT, and in Texas it's CCP, the Code of Criminal Procedure 1622C5, and it allows for a transfer where you can leave the charges pending if that is going to work better for your community.
And that's something that you could address if that's the route that the transfer and we keep the criminal charge pending is to give, if you're meeting in the AOT program and for renewal, say every 90 days for that commitment order, that could be a status check-in on the criminal side to let them know this is what's going on, whether it's a packet or just a simple email to the prosecutor, the judge, the defense attorney on the criminal side. They can coincide. It doesn't have to be a difficult process to get that information.
And they don't have to be competent. That's the other thing. They don't have to be competent in AOT court. So people who may not qualify for mental health court because they already found IST could work in an AOT program because they are not necessarily have to be competent.
Yeah, and it is great. I was just looking at these handouts that were passed around, and we have on one hand, it's the perfect balance. We're talking about the what is a criteria for mental health court on the criminal side, and it's someone who's most successful because they have insight. And then on the other side, we have AOT for those individuals who don't have the insight or they lack the insight, the anosognosia. So it really is a great balance to be looking at these various programs.
Working together.
Yes?
In AOT in El Paso, did y'all use it for individuals who were incompetent, unlikely to restore, since the code is silent on what to do in those situations? And they don't meet the criteria for civil commitment?
We tried. We didn't hash out that process very well. We did make an attempt. We were trying everything we possibly could of all the different referrals, but I couldn't speak to that we had a success on it or that we were able to do it. But I would encourage you to look into it. Any more questions that y'all might have? Yes, Judge.
So when they're doing the commitment order, the actual hearing, is it generally in the usual mechanism that the court uses, or are they doing it at a table?
The way we were doing it in El Paso, we were doing it at the round table, the conference room. We just all kind of stood up a little bit more seriously. We had the court reporter log on to Zoom. We went through, our defense attorney was there and able to have a cross-examination that they wanted to put on, but it was a formal part of the informal roundtable meetings that we had. Welcome. Yes?
When you guys were setting up the AOT program in El Paso, what kind of relationship building did you do with the hospital to kind of encourage that recommendation or have that referral pipeline?
Well, it was actually a great, let me back up a little bit. I was not part of the original kind of stakeholder building. It was a little bit of a barrier, to be honest, in the beginning. I did not want the program, I just couldn't buy into it. But once I was on board and I was able to learn how this process happened, we have really good relationships, the county attorney's office with the state hospital, and we work really closely with their residency program, their psychiatry residency program. And so that relationship was already there. It was just about educating the hospital about the program, which was key. And it's part of the curriculum or the training that the county attorney's office did on a yearly basis for the incoming residents and for the attending physicians or psychiatrists at the hospital, just so that they were renewed and refreshed, because that was our referral source. And it was great because we had the doctors who would start to see when someone was coming in on that very first probable cause hearing, we would begin tracking somebody so that we would be prepared to receive them into the AOT program. It took time to develop, but the key component was to educate and provide the training for them on a reoccurring basis, not just a one-time.
And now that she's at JCMH, we're going to continue that curriculum.
Yes. So a project in the works is that, as you all know, there's a lack of psychiatrists across the state, and we're really brainstorming ways how to address this need for psychiatrists. There was a Supreme Court case that came out that essentially designated that a psychiatry resident is deemed as a psychiatrist, meeting various factors. We have medical schools all across the state. We have psychiatry residency programs. We have a whole bunch of new forensic psychiatry fellowship programs across the state. So by harnessing this academic side, we can bring them into the legal setting be able to utilize and have access to these psychiatrists, while in turn, the second piece, you have to have a balanced relationship for sustainability, is for us lawyers, legal side, to train these psychiatrists, these residents about the legal system. We have these two parts that are coming together in these environments over and over again, but with not really communicating well about these different environments. I wouldn't be comfortable in a clinical setting and how to engage with the patient and what to say and not to say. And the same thing when I was as the prosecutor in the mental health unit, I had these brilliant doctors, psychiatrists, residents coming in with so much knowledge, and they would freeze in the courtroom. You know, it's something so simple as, please state your name and occupation for the record. Yes. Doctor, once again, I'm sorry, my question, please state your name and occupation for the record. Yes, ma'am. And the judges are getting upset. This is a serious situation. You know, this case could be dismissed. You know, the judge is having to, if I don't have a witness that's testifying and providing the evidence appropriate for the case, I'm looking at something very serious for this community member that should not even be in the question of whether this person gets treatment or not. So to me, it was just, we have to just assist the clinical mind in a legal setting. And so, you know, everything from courtroom visits. Okay, guys, here's where the judge sits. Here's what an ad litem sits. Here's what they do. You know, here's why they're asking you these questions. It's not against you if they have a role. And little by little, developing curriculum to help these psychiatrist residents to get into the legal side, feel confident. Not because I wanted a way to win the case. That's never the goal. The goal is to what the court deems there's evidence and this person is needing treatment in an inpatient or outpatient setting. That's the court's decision. But if there's a blockage from somebody who has the clinical knowledge that this person needs treatment, but they're unable to communicate it in a courtroom setting just based on the environment, that seems like a barrier that should be removed and could be removed quite easily. It just takes some patience with the legal system, with our academic setting, but it can be done. And so developing with JCMH, how do we harness, again, this academic setting so that they're learning and we're getting those psychiatrists that we need, but what are we providing to them as well? How are we better equipping these residents to be able to not just be great in a courtroom setting, but the more they know about the legal setting, the better they're going to be as psychiatrists and vice versa. Part of the interaction we'd have is these psychiatrists would be able to teach me things as well. As a lawyer, I can care about mental health, I can learn and read, but I got to ask these residents questions one-on-one. What does this diagnosis mean, and why does it present this way? Or how would this be in a community setting? Is this something that would rise to an emergency or harm to self in your mind? And that really helped develop me as a lawyer as well. And I think that's very important, how much that we can learn from one another on both sides. So that's something, something we're developing and hoping to continue with all the medical school across Texas. And any lawyers or want to get involved in that, let me know. Appreciate any help I can get. But any other questions?
And I wanted to add one more thing on the data collection. All I know is that TAC developed a tool. We would love to start fresh with you all and help you track that data. The clearest thing in my mind is we know how much jail beds cost and we know how much hospital beds cost. And so if we can get just enough information about that person to say this would have been the trajectory otherwise if they weren't in the community and in this program, X number of days times that cost. And if we can track that data, that will add up so quickly. And I think that will that'll mean a lot for when you want to keep the program going. So yeah, let's be our guinea pig. Let us help on the data too.
Things I wish I coulda, shoulda, woulda known at the beginning of a program as you all are starting is the data is the most important thing. At some point, I mean, the grant runs out. If you start planning now for that sustainability, like all the different programs, you know, we heard about the jail-based competency restoration, sustainability is how we continue to help people. So the more that you can collect up front, the better. There's so many resources as well. The Treatment Advocacy Center has a data component to them as well that has these things mapped out. And anything we can do and develop with you all so that we can see Hays County just smoothly transition off of that grant and continue to serve your community members, that'll be just wonderful to be able to assist with.
Well,
Thank you
very
all so much for having us. Appreciate it.